Good afternoon. Welcome to Update Training. I want to talk a little bit about some traffic-related issues that have some of the things you may have already know about. We've come out with some bulletins and so forth, but I just want to go through these issues. So, a jockey. Oh, never mind. How do you advance the slides? Right here. Okay. First thing we'd like to talk about is some changes we made to Section 7.25 on overhead signs. This has already come out as a design bulletin. Just a little bit of background that I want to go over. A year and a half ago, we entered into a research project with the University of North Florida and Texas Transportation Institute to look at our overhead signs and look at some of the Type 11 sheeting and determine if we could eliminate the lighting on our overhead signs. That research was completed in June of this last year, and in October we came out with a design bulletin implementing some of those changes that were made. The letting dates, effective letting dates are all projects after January the 1st, 2014. So this has already been, most of you should have already seen it, but we're just pulling it out of the design bulletin and adding it to the plans preparation manual. Now, there are several conditions where we will still need external lighting on overhead signs. Notice the first one is horizontal curves with radius of 880 feet or less in rural areas. The next one is horizontal curves of radius of 2,500 feet or less in urban areas. Now, you may look at those and say, well, what's the difference? Why a different radius in rural areas versus urban areas? TTI in the research created an illumination model that looked at all the kinds of different things. They actually looked at in urban areas with glare and background lighting and so forth to find out how much observation time was necessary for people to read it. In a rural area where it's dark and almost no glare, there's nothing to compete, so it's easier to read the sign and get the message than it is on an urban area. So that's the difference between the 880 versus 2,500 feet. The last condition is in sag vertical curves with K values of 60 or less. If you've got a K value of 60 or less, the headlights are not going to shine on the sign, so we do recommend external lighting for sag vertical curves. But other than this, these are the only conditions where we are going to continue to utilize external lighting. Just as a note, we are not, design is not participating or not in the midst of trying to figure out how we're going to convert our existing signs to signs with removing the lighting. That's all being taken care of as a maintenance function. The next issue is internally illuminated street name signs. There's a combination of issues that are going on with internally illuminated street name signs that we were trying to correct. Right now, the street name signs is addressed in the traffic engineering manual in section 2.2.4. And there's a couple of, I just wanted to show you a couple of these, what it says in the traffic engineering manual to kind of understand what we were trying to accomplish. The traffic engineering manual addresses overhead street name signs as a group. It doesn't differentiate between overhead street name signs that are static and those that are internally illuminated. But you notice the third note in that section says that a minimum 8-inch upper and 6-inch lowercase lettering is the minimum for street name signs. And it talks about some preferred fonts, and if you can't accommodate that, to drop down to a Series E. To compound the issue, the next one talks about when you can, FHWA recommends using a 12-inch uppercase and 9-inch lowercase font. So it's no clear guidance as to what to start with. To make it worse, our specification says that internally illuminated street name signs larger than 18 square feet in area are not listed on the APL. So most of these signs that are being used should be on the APL. And our specs gives guidance that says that if you're using a sign that's more than 18 square feet, the engineer must approve it. And that process of approving is very time consuming. They have to review wind load calculations and all kinds of calculations to find out whether these larger signs will meet our criteria. So we went back and decided that we really need to simplify how we do internally illuminated street name signs. So we've added to section 2.10 to the plans preparation manual. We still are referencing the traffic engineering manual in section 2. That section talks about overall signs, block letters, abbreviations, and some other information that's not covered in the plans preparation manual. So we're still going to refer you to the TEM on these types of signs, but we're giving clear guidance on how to start with the text on an internally illuminated street name sign. So the first thing we're going to do is to limit the width of the internally illuminated street name signs to 9 feet. What was happening before with the traffic engineering manual guidance of 12 and 9, some of these signs were getting way beyond 9 feet, and it created all kinds of problems in construction and the acceptance. So we've given an order here of what the designer should do on internally illuminated street name signs. They would first start off with a 10-inch uppercase and 8-inch lowercase with an E-modified font. If that font it ends up, the street name is long enough and it extends it beyond the 9-foot limit, then they will drop down and use a 10-inch uppercase with a 8-inch lowercase with a type E font. If that size still does not accomplish the sign within 9 feet, it gives guidance all the way down as to what to use. So the object of putting this in the plans preparation manual is to standardize or to limit our internally illuminated street name signs to 9 feet. And this gives guidance as to how to accomplish that as far as the layout of the sign. There were some other things that we did that relate to internally illuminated street name signs. This again goes over the maximum width of shall not exceed 9 feet. Talks about where to install them, that if they're used on span wires, the internally illuminated sign should be mounted to the strain pole. And we added some more to the mast arms. Right now, the mast arm support, the signs can be on the arm or on the support. But we added some guidance in there. It says when mounted to the arm, the distance between the support and the near side edge of the sign shall not be greater than 10 feet. We would like to have these signs as close to the support as possible. So some additional guidance on where that sign should be installed on the mast arm. This is another change that was made last year. It was initiated at a discussion at the executive workshop in July of 2013. The discussion came about with, what is the state's policy on interstate highway interchanges as far as lighting is concerned? We got to analyzing these interchanges and found that there's 549 interchanges on the interstate highway system. Of those 549, 55 of those interchanges are not lighted, or they're not even, or there's no funding allocated for lighting. There's actually more that's lighted than 55, but they're already funded to light them. We did some analysis as to what the cost would be involved, and it was decided at the executive workshop that We, in the state of Florida, will light all of our interchanges on the interstate highway system. And right now, we went through a programming exercise to put these in the work program and having the rest of these interchanges lit by 2019, or at least funded by 2019. Right now, the MUTS manual is what we tell designers to go through on an analysis for warrants for lighting. That MUTS manual is under review, is under changes, undergoing changes right now. But we added a section in Chapter 7 that dealt with lighting justification. What we didn't want to do is to go through this exercise of the next 5 years of getting all of our interchanges lit, and then later on we end up with adding interchanges that were not lit on down the road. So we put this in there as a lighting justification to cover interstate highway interchanges. We are giving guidance that a warrant analysis will be required on all interchanges, but for interstate interchanges, it will not be a determining factor as to whether to install lighting. If it does not meet the warrant analysis, you would still install lighting. So this was added in there for new interchanges that may be proposed by developers, or just new interchanges that are necessary. The requirement is that all of these interstate interchanges be lit. This is a question that kind of came up right at the probably in November. Several years ago, we added a modification to our strain pole layouts to say that you have to use a box span arrangement, that we will not use diagonals anymore on span wire oriented intersections on the wires. Somebody called up the other day and wanted to know, does that also apply to mast arms? And the same reasoning is a little bit different in mast arms, but the observation angles are basically the same. It's very difficult if you got a diagonal mast arm to see the proper distance and so forth. So we added this statement to Section 7 saying that mast arms should be oriented approximately 9 degrees to approach traffic, and that diagonals are not allowed. I know we have some diagonals out there right now, but from this point on, we are not allowing any more diagonal mast arms. This is another question, comment that we had with coordinating with structures on the mast arm supports and the loadings that we are creating on mast arm supports. There was a requirement in here to the signal designer to give information to the structural for analysis of the structure. We struck out the sign sizes in the third note of that information and added a separate note to cover signs specifically. The size and locations of signs are to be indicated on the mast arm where they are. And we put a restriction on the signs that go on mast arms. And the restriction is that only required regulatory signs and street name signs be put on mast arm supports. You shouldn't be using it for guide signs or lane allocations and so forth. It is strictly required regulatory signs or street name signs. This is kind of another clarification for the same thing on span wire assemblies. We are saying on span wire assemblies, they're restricted to only required regulatory signs. We made some revisions to Chapter 29, which is our structural supports for traffic-related supports. This has been in there for quite a while. Several years ago, we added some restrictions on lengths and maximum span lengths that we would allow on our span sign structures, our cantilevered sign structures, our mast arms, and our strain pole. And when we first added this, we put an allowance of what to do when we needed to deviate from or exceed these values. And we had created a design variation for when we needed to exceed these values. Now, we went back and looked at how many variations, how much of this structures were actually being proposed on projects that exceeded our recommended limits. And we found that there's a lot of this going on, and a lot of the district people were having to review these variations for structures that exceed these limits. The decision was made that we are no longer going to allow designers to exceed these limits. So we took out the design variation process as a means of exceeding those limitational values. If you have to exceed these values, something other than a variation is going to have to be used to do it. And there needs to be a lot of documentation as to why you need to exceed these values. I know in teaching intersection design training, some districts have policies on where they will allow mast arms and so forth, and some of the district policies on there may have to be adjusted to accommodate these limitations. Some things that we have not, I guess, came out formally with recommendations that I want to give you some updates on. Right now, LED is consuming a lot of my time. We have a lot of manufacturers that have LED fixtures that want to get their fixtures on the state highway system. Right now, we have a process for maintaining agencies to, if they want to convert fixtures, on what they have to do to change out LED fixtures. And basically that criteria says that they cannot reduce the limits of illumination. They still have to meet the same, our specified guidelines in Chapter 7. But we are suggesting that on new projects that that designers consider using LED fixtures. I know a lot of lighting designers are probably not familiar with LED fixtures. There's a lot of them out there. There's a broad variation in what the photometrics are, and a lot of designers are just not familiar with the photometrics of LED fixtures. What we're going to do is, if you have a new project, we're asking for those designers in the district to coordinate with us. We have a modified special provision for LED fixtures, and we are coordinating with the lighting designer to suggest different fixtures based on what the project requirements are. We are also monitoring the payback periods on these fixtures that are actually being used. Sometimes the contractors will use a different fixture than what was used for the basis of design. We try to determine exactly what the additional cost was to add LED to this project and determine payback periods for LED. Until the fixtures really kind of get stabilized to the as far as the photometrics and having a large variety of fixtures that meet, specifications of our existing 400-watt high-pressure sodium, we really don't want to get into adding a lot of poles just to accommodate LED fixtures. So we are recommending that on new projects we move forward, but we're using spending some guidance with designers to try to guide them to the best fixtures to use on projects. If you got any questions on these LED, considering LED on projects, just give me a call. This was a change that was made at our last management team meeting in the central office. It involves pendant lighting. Several years ago, we added restrictions to our underdeck lighting, which are in notes to table 7.3.4. And what we added in there was this note 2. And we said the preferred luminaire for underdeck lighting is a wall mount fixture. And pendant hung shall only be used when it's impossible to meet the requirements, talking about the photometric requirements, with wall mount fixtures. Now, we went back and looked at what has occurred since we put that in the PPM, and maintenance and structures had reviewed those numbers and felt like there was an inordinate number of pendant lights still being used on our projects. And it creates a real hazard to maintenance folks that have to maintain these lights, because in most cases you have to close a lane of traffic to maintain that pendant hung fixture. So the decision was made that not restrict pendant hung, but from this point on, we are no longer going to use pendant hung fixtures. You'll do what we can with a wall mount fixture, and we're going to change this note 1 to say, where you have underdeck lighting that cannot meet the adjacent roadway lighting, that we will just live with it, and that those values will not be used as far as uniformity purposes outside the underdeck lighting. So if you've got some lighting and you've worked with pendant lighting on a project right now, I think you're going to find that when you get ready to open up transport, the pendant lighting pay item has been closed. So if you got any questions, or you've got projects with pendant lighting where you feel like you absolutely have to have pendant lighting, it will have to be approved on a case-by-case basis. So that's all I have this afternoon. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to kind of go through questions you might have. Okay, the questions come. One of the questions that has been asked is, do we still add extra clearance in case we decide afterwards to add lighting? The answer to that question is no. The clearance will be to the bottom of the sign. We're not anticipating any issues with having to come back and add lighting later on. So when you determine the clearance to an overhead sign structure, it will be to the base of the bottom of the sign, not to where the luminaire would have been. Next question, will IT partial interchange lighting be considered in addition to complete interchange lighting? The answer to that question is no. We have criteria in Chapter 7 that deals with interchange lighting, and we want these lightings to be full lighting on our interstate interchanges. Now, if you've got another interchange that's not on the interstate highway system, this is strictly as it pertains to interstate interchanges. I have a question here. Where can I find the special provisions for LED guidelines? Probably the easiest way to deal with that is I've given that to all the lighting engineers in the districts. They should be able to give you a copy of it. If you want to, you can just email me. I'll be happy to send it to you. It's kind of a living document. As we have LED manufacturers come in, I have each one of them review that special modified provision and tell me whether their fixture can meet those guidelines or problems they have with our specification. We're also working with other states that are using LED to find if they've got provisions in there to accommodate some of the issues we have with LED lighting. So we're, as we have more guidelines, we're trying to incorporate those into those special provisions. So it is a kind of a living document that we are continuing to modify. I have a question here. Will LED be allowed for high mast lighting? We have some high mast lighting LED that we are evaluating right now. The problem with LED lighting, right, as far as high mast is concerned, the only fixture that I'm aware of that's an LED fixture is a symmetrical fixture. So if you are in an interchange area, especially down toward the tapers where you need to use an asymmetrical type fixture, there are none available as far as LED right now. Now, I know some of these manufacturers that have the symmetrical fixtures right now are diligently working on new photometrics for an asymmetrical fixture. As soon as we have a couple of manufacturers out there that have LED for high mast, I will get that information out to the districts, and we will start incorporating that into interchange lighting as well. But right now, our LED lighting is restricted to conventional lighting. And to, well, it won't apply anymore, but it would apply to our sign lighting that we were using as well. So, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. If you've got any questions later on that come up, you can just email those to me. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.